Welcome to Dr. Pam Unleashed, where we skip the gimmicks and get real about what helps pets actually thrive. I'm Dr. Pam, functional medicine vet, symptom decoder, and your guide to a vibrant, no BS pet care. Let's get into it. This episode is part of Beyond the Diagnosis, the series for pet parents staring down a scary diagnosis and wondering what to do next. Because a name isn't a plan and paralysis isn't your only option. Welcome back to Dr. Pam Unleashed. I'm Dr. Pam, and this is episode 2 of our Beyond the Diagnosis series, a multimodal approach to cancer. If you've not listened to episode 1 yet, I really want to encourage you to go back and start there. We laid a critical foundation in that episode about why cancer is happening at the rate that it is, what's going on in the gut, and why the terrain matters so much. Today, we are building on that foundation. I want to start with something that happens in my practice more than you might think. A client comes in, sits down across from me, pulls their phone out, and shows me a protocol that they found online or that an AI program put together for them. And I want to be really clear. I am not here to shame anyone for doing that. When your dog has cancer, you're scared and you want to do something, anything. You go looking for answers. I completely understand that instinct. It's love. It's desperation. It's the very human need to feel like you're doing something, anything. But here's the problem. Knowing what exists is completely different than knowing how to use it. Knowing the names of repurposed drugs is not the same as understanding how they work together, how to dose them appropriately for your specific dog, what genetic factors might affect how your dog processes them, and what to watch for when something shifts. And I promise you, it is so much easier to start this journey correctly from the beginning than it is to unwind things after they've gone sideways. So today, we're going to do 2 things. First, we're going to talk about why cancer is so much smarter than people realize, because understanding how cancer operates is the key to understanding why the multimodal approach is not just a preference, it's a necessity. And second, we're going to demystify the language because there's a lot of terminology floating around out there and it can be overwhelming and confusing. Multimodal approach, repurposed drugs, orthomolecular medicine, off-label use, all of these mean something specific and they're all connected. Once you understand how they connect, everything starts to make a lot more sense. Let's get into it. Cancer is smarter than you think. Cancer is like the world's most sophisticated con artist. It disguises itself, it hides its most dangerous operatives, it builds safe houses, it has contingency plans, and the moment you think you have it cornered, it finds another exit. It's not passive, it's not static, it's dynamic, adaptive, and extraordinarily good at survival. Here's something that should interest you. Research tells us that 30 years of new pharmaceutical cancer therapies 30 years have improved overall survivability of a cancer patient by an average of just 3.4 months. 3 decades, and we get only 3.4 months? Nice. I'm not saying that to be discouraging. I'm saying it because the numbers are telling us something critically important. That coming after cancer with a single pharmaceutical agent, no matter how sophisticated, is not enough. Cancer figures it out. It finds another way. It routes around the attack every single time. The reason it can do that comes down to something called cancer stem cells. Stay with me here because this concept is absolutely key to understanding everything else that we're going to talk about in the series. Most cancer cells in a tumor are what we call bulk cells. They make up the majority, or bulk, of the tumor mass. Conventional chemotherapy and radiation are actually reasonably effective at killing the bulk cells. That's why you sometimes see a tumor shrink after conventional treatment. That's why numbers look good in the short term, but hidden within that tumor, protected, waiting, and surviving, are cancer stem cells. And cancer stem cells are a completely different animal. Cancer stem cells are the most treatment-resistant cells in the tumor. They survive chemotherapy. They survive radiation. And here's the part that I think is the most important thing that I'm going to say today. There is evidence to suggest that conventional treatment actually makes cancer stem cells stronger, meaning they're more aggressive, more resistant. So as the tumor shrinks, everyone's feeling hopeful, the numbers are looking promising, but the stem cells that survived are now more dangerous than they were before. And when the cancer comes back, and it often does, it comes back with a vengeance, more intense and more aggressive. This is not an opinion. This is published science. A 2024 paper in the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine describes what they call mitochondrial stem cell connection, the theory that cancer originates from impaired energy production in the stem cells, and that those cancer stem cells are present and driving the disease at every single stage. Conventional therapies target the DNA of cancer cells, but they don't restore the underlying energy dysfunction that created the problem in the first place. They blow things up, they do not repair. They do not fix the root problem. Cancer, the con artist that is, exploits exactly that gap. And then there's the tumor microenvironment. Think of this as the fortress cancer builds around itself. It's not just the tumor, it's the entire protected world cancer constructs to keep itself safe. It manipulates the immune system. It controls the blood supply. It creates conditions that shield the cancer stem cells from attack. And if you are only targeting the tumor itself, you are not dismantling that fortress. You are leaving cancer's most important defense system completely intact. So what do you do about all this? We stop coming after cancer with one weapon. We start using what we call a multimodal approach. That is exactly what we're going to talk about next. Making sense of the language. Now that you understand why single agent approaches fall short, the language that surrounds integrative cancer care is going to make a lot more sense, because all of it, every term you're going to encounter when you start researching this, is pointing at the same solution. Repurposed drugs are existing medications, ones that were originally developed for one condition and that are now being studied and used for something else entirely. These are not experimental compounds. These are not untested theories. These are drugs that in many cases have been in veterinary medicine for over 50 years with well-established safety profiles. We know how they behave in the body. What the science is now revealing is that some of these drugs have capabilities that we did not fully appreciate, capabilities that turn out to be remarkably relevant to cancer. In veterinary medicine, we call this off-label use. I want to be transparent about what that means because it often gets misunderstood. Off-label does not mean unsafe. It doesn't mean experimental. It simply means the science has outpaced the paperwork. When the drug's patent expires, it becomes available as a generic, right? And nobody is going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to formally approve a 50-year-old drug for a new condition when any pharmaceutical company can already make it and sell it cheaply. The approvals have not followed the science. That is all off-label means. And here's what ties all of this together. In my practice, there is never a single rigid protocol applied to every patient. The multimodal philosophy is consistent, but which repurposed drugs, which specific combination is right for your dog, that is individualized, built around that specific patient, their terrain, their cancer type, their genetic profile, their current health status. We build the right protocol for that patient, and that brings me to something I feel very strongly about. Why you cannot do this alone and why that matters. Remember when I mentioned at the top of this episode that I see it more and more, someone coming in with a protocol they found online or that AI program put together for them? I want to come back to that now because everything we just talked about is exactly why that matters so much. When your dog has cancer and you're scared, you go looking for answers. That's love. That's completely understandable. But knowing what exists is completely different from knowing how to use it. And here's what most people don't realize until something goes wrong. It is infinitely easier to start this journey correctly from the beginning than it is to try to unwind things after they've gone sideways. Before we even begin a protocol in my practice, we do an MDR1 gene mutation test. MDR1 is a genetic variant that affects how certain dogs metabolize specific drugs. Dogs with this mutation can have serious and even life-threatening reactions to medications that are perfectly safe in other dogs. Truly, any dog can have a reaction to any drug, so it's the individual response here that is key. Several of the drugs we use in multimodal cancer protocols are on that list. I now do this test in-house at the very first appointment. We don't wait, we don't guess. I start the first phase of the protocol, layer in the second, then the third, and the MDR result informs every step of that process. This is exactly why starting correctly means so much. We build on a foundation of information, not assumption. Then there's also the monitoring. When we are running these protocols, we are doing blood work every 3 months at minimum. I want to be very specific about what that means in my practice because how blood work is done matters just as much as what we are looking for in it. The way the blood is drawn, how it's prepared, whether the dog is fasted, how quickly it gets to the lab, how it's handled, all of that affects the accuracy of the results. And when you follow trends over time, which is exactly what we do in these cases, any inconsistency in how the blood is collected contaminates your data. You cannot make good clinical decisions from inconsistent data. This is why I draw and prepare all blood work myself. I know exactly how it was collected, how it was handled, and how it was sent to the lab. This consistency is what makes trend following meaningful and actionable. Reading that blood work requires a specific lens. We are not just checking whether values are in or out of range. We are doing functional analysis, looking at patterns, trends, subtle shifts that tell a story about what's happening in the body before it becomes a visible problem. That is a different skill set than conventional lab reading. And then there's the physical examination itself. In my practice, that always includes a traditional Chinese medical or TCM assessment as well, because they happen together in the same visit as part of the same intake. In TCM, we are looking for the space before the disease, changes that show up in the energy systems before they ever show up in physiology, before the blood work changes, before the symptoms appear. Combined with hands on your dog, eyes on your dog, and 30 years of clinical intuition in that room, there are things I can feel and see and assess that no blood panel, no AI program, and no internet protocol can replace. The subtle shift in a lymph node, the change in energy, the thing that is just slightly different from last time, that is the piece that catches problems before they become crises. It is irreplaceable, and it is a piece that makes everything else we do more effective. I see patients at every stage of this journey. The hardest cases are not always the most aggressive cancers. The hardest cases are the ones who arrive at my door already going sideways, because it's one thing to build a road, it's a completely different thing to try to build it while the car is already in the ditch. Starting right is not a luxury, it's a strategy. So here is where we are after episode 2. You now understand why cancer is so hard to beat with a single agent approach. The cancer stem cells, the tumor microenvironment, the fortress cancer builds around itself. You understand the language, multimodal approach, repurposed drugs, off-label use. You understand that they're all pointing to the same powerful solution. You understand why proper veterinary guidance, genetic awareness, consistent monitoring, and clinical intuitions are not optional extras. They are what make these protocols work safely and effectively. Next week, in the final episode 3 of Beyond the Diagnosis, we will go deeper on the actual protocols, the specific repurposed drugs we use, how they work together, why we combine them the way we do, and what science says about each one. That is the episode you've been waiting for. Before you go, don't forget to download your pocket guide for this episode, 5 Important Questions for Your Oncologist, on our Hero.fm app. And as always, your full transcript is there too if you want to go back and review anything we covered today. I'm Dr. Pam. Thank you for being here. Remember, stay curious, stay hopeful, and always live your life with a little bit of woo and a whole lot of woof.